I'm here today with Dalton Henderson, the 2012 state champion for Ocean Lakes High School in Virginia Beach, who was also recently named the head coach for the storied Colonial Forge wrestling team up in Stafford, Virginia. Coach Henderson tells us today about his journey to a state title, including the role of team camps, competition, and having the right mentality in wrestling. As always, please rate and review the podcast, especially on iTunes, because it helps bring visibility to the show and our sport. Now let's get rolling.
He taught me to get up when I didn't want to get up, when I wanted to quit.
I had high goals, man. I've always had high goals.
And so when I won it, I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, you guys are right.
It's not the thrill of winning. It's the joy of having that personal goal and being able to achieve that and walk off the mat with your head held high and with your hand up.
That just fueled my fire, and I was in every state championship match from there on until I graduated.
That was when I really started doing the kind of wrestling that I was capable of.
Anybody that steps in the ring and just decides to commit the entire time is a state champion in my book.
Welcome back to another episode of Back Points, the podcast where top wrestlers and coaches reveal their secrets about how they won state titles in high school wrestling. Today we have another great guest. He's the winner of the state title for Ocean Lakes High School back in 2012, and also the new head coach for Colonial Forge. Coach Henderson, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Coach Marlowe. It's a real pleasure.
And did I get that right? So in 2012, you won the state title. What weight class was that?
I was 113 that year. So yeah, it was pretty special. It's a very special year.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. But, to start off, when did you get named the head coach at Colonial?
It was late August last year. And it goes long back to like I was in high school. I wrestled in HSCA. Was wrestling for Prestige Worldwide. We wrestled this team from Maryland, got in contact with them afterwards, and ended up near the end of the summer, right before I wrestled at VMI, got to wrestle for their team. So he knew actually a couple of kids that were at Colonial Forge, and he just, casual checks like, hey, Colonial Forge is looking for a head coach. And I just jumped on top of it, really, honestly. So.
Well, it's a great program. It has a really strong history. I think they've won 7 titles in the last.
Yeah, 7. Yeah, it's 7. I think in the last. I think it's like since 2000 or something. They've been really. They've been really. I remember the reason why it's special for me actually being there is because they won the team title the one year I won state. So we always chat about that if I see the old coach up there. So.
That's a great history to be a part of.
Yeah, it's real special.
Do you have a vision for the program that you want to share?
Yeah, honestly, it's eventually getting back to that level, but also trying to build them to not just be a great at the state level, but at the national level as well. And I know it's hard. It's not easy coming off of the history, with Coach Swink and everything that he's built up there. But it's really about trying to lay the foundation for how I want our program to go. And it's not easy. I'm 25 years old. There's not a lot of young coaches out there at 25 years old that you're given the keys to the program, So it's been definitely a great learning process. And the kids were growing all the time. I stay in contact with them almost every day. So it's been fantastic. We have a great relationship. I know they're working hard, obviously, through everything that's going on. But I can feel that we're starting to head in that right direction, and they're starting to wrestle and kind of shape and have the mindset that I had when I was in high school that made me so successful. So,
well, let's go back to that a little bit. So when did you start wrestling?
So I started actually wrestling in 2nd grade. My brother had wrestled, a year ago he was a wrestling ref. So now he's done with that. He's kind of decided he wants to do something else, but he wrestled in middle school. I went to his match and he had won, and I was like, oh, that's really awesome. I think I'd be great at it. And, so I went to the Corporate Landing Wrestling Club, and the first one I ever had was like me and 4 little toddlers that we've all grown up together. and I used to lose all the time and cry and be upset. And but it also taught me, you know, as I learned it, you know, eventually you learn more about it and you get that mindset, but you start kind of figuring out like, okay, I'm tired of losing. You know, what do I need to do to kind of figure that out of how I can start winning matches? I'm not losing to these guys all the time. So
I think that it is a good strategy for us to build more support and more participation in wrestling, to bring elementary school kids, little kids out to watch high school matches and college matches. And, you know, I think if the more that those kids see the older kids out there wrestling, I think the more they're going to want to be a part of it. So, you know, I think it sounds like you maybe had that experience a little bit.
yeah, I mean, when I was when I was in high school, I mean, Ocean Lakes, they still do the kids club, and I think it was really important. I think honestly for me, that's kind of when I got my first taste of being a coach. And, you know, and there'd be weekends where if I'm not competing, if their little kids are competing, I'm out there coaching them. And I do think that's extremely important. I think it's not only having that exposure at a young age, but it's having those role models. I think sometimes the high school kids are so focused on the wrestling that it's like, you know, you have these little kids, you can be a role model to them and kind of inspire them to really start trying to wrestle and be like, hey, let me learn more about the sport. And I think that's what's important about it, is having not only, you know, learning about the sport and being exposed to it, but having the right personality and having the right role models around you. I think that's what kind of helps propel and gets the participation up and able to, you know, have the sport continue on the trend. So hopefully build it back up.
Mm-hmm. So you started wrestling in the second grade.
Yeah. Kept wrestling through all the way. Wrestled at Corporate Landing, placed in our cities a couple times. Last 8th grade year, I was 8th grade. I went undefeated, got to the finals, ended up losing in overtime on takedown. So it was like that first experience of being in the finals and not kind of getting what you want. And that was a learning experience for me, because it was like, I don't ever want to feel that experience again. So continue on 9th grade. Luckily, you know, I was blessed. I was able to have Coach Harcourt for 1 year as my coach. It was his last year, obviously, but I was able to be coached by him, with his son being there, Alan Harcourt, and helping me out. And you know, going through that whole season, it wasn't easy. You know, I had a great teammate, Eddie Bracey, who had come from Kinsville, who was really successful. And he was coming over. I mean, he's coming over to wrestle in the room and be my teammate and help make us great. And he pushed me to be better. Honestly, I wouldn't be where I am today without him. And that's a true statement. And we just kept pushing each other throughout the whole year. And we go to districts. I take third. I go to regionals, and we start getting in kind of the wrestlebacks. And I'm kind of starting to figure it out. I have heard a lot of people talk about, you know, there's never been a freshman that's ever qualified and for AAA at Ocean Lakes. And me and Eddie we thought we could be the first two to do it. Eddie fell a little bit short. I didn't. I was able to kind of push past that wall, and it gave me a lot of confidence going in. I was like, okay, you're already starting to make history here, and you're only a freshman. What else, you know, when you leave here, what do you want your mark to be? So I think that was really important. That freshman year really set the tone for my career, at the point where, you know what, whatever happens, if people are doubting you, you keep grinding forward, you keep pushing away. So it helped a lot.
Yeah, for me, my sophomore year really set the tone. You know, I started when I was a freshman, and so I was really, you know, a ton of learning went into it. I certainly didn't qualify for the state tournament as a freshman, and but I qualified as a sophomore. You know, I went to camps, I wrestled year round, and able to cover a lot of distance in a fairly short amount of time. But for me, it was crucial to be able to go to the state tournament, see what it was like, so that when I returned later, it wasn't intimidating.
Yeah, I think honestly that for me, freshman year was like, oh wow, like you did it, you made your goal, you qualified, and now like you're there and you're still starstruck. And then, I mean, your first round, you're wrestling returning state champion, and you're just like, oh, okay, we'll see how this goes. And You're just kind of along for the ride, but you take all that experience in, and you're like, you know what? All right, next year, now I know what I need to work towards. It's not going to be the first time where I'm just like eyes wide open. So it was a great experience. It did help me kind of really propel me into that sophomore year. I traveled around a lot as well. I mean, that's one thing my coach preached, was obviously staying in the mat room and lifting and doing everything right, even in the off season, eating the right things, but also not just restricting yourself to the room. You have to get out there. You got to learn. And that's something that I've carried on to my kids now. I mean, there are a lot of times they'll go to a club and they'll kind of come back a little worried. And I'm like, I love that you went to a club. Like, if you learn something new, show me, please. Because you want to learn that. You want the sport to grow, and you want obviously your wrestlers to be as well-rounded as possible. I think the sport now, from where it was 10 years ago, it was very strong, and, you had to be the Iowa style, the strong, tough guy that was and I kind of, the way I've seen wrestling now lately has been more of an art form. You have these different techniques in the way you're wrestling, and it's very different. I mean, you see guys like Yanni. Yanni's not the biggest guy, but he wrestles differently. He learns a lot. He's never uncomfortable in any position. And I think that's what's important about that. I think the more well-rounded you are, it's important to obviously have that lifting and that body. But if you're learning and you're getting comfortable in all these positions, that's going to help offset maybe you being a little bit weaker or slower than the other guy.
So in terms of when you're talking to your guys about strength building versus technique versus endurance, do you have are you more focused on one of those areas rather than the other?
Probably. I mean, for me, I was more of the technique and endurance guy. I like lifting. To me, is really important because you can't just not lift. Like that's just impossible. Like you have to have some form, and I think lifting also teaches you. It helps you gain that explosiveness and work on certain aspects of wrestling that you can't get from the endurance or just from practicing the technique. I mean, like for me, the strength, the thing that helped the most was with the strengthening was helping me push past that point where sometimes you're getting to that last rep and it's a heavy rep. And, you're like, I don't know if I can do it. And it's like, you got to push yourself mentally past that. And so I think that's what lifting helped the most with. But I was never the biggest guy. Even now when I wrestle some of my kids, or I've gone out and when I competed at VMI, I was never the biggest guy. But I mean, there'd be a lot of times where they were like, I took you for granted because, you're not this big, strong, burly guy, but when I wrestle you, I do feel your strength. So I think you can be strong, but you don't always have to look the biggest guy. You don't have to be the guy that always looks and has the big muscles. So
yeah, I think there's something to that farmer strength, that's
yeah. I take, and I do a lot of I cut the grass a lot. I do a lot of wood cutting back here at home. I do a lot, like even when now, like I work at a restaurant and I do food running, so I'm lifting a lot of trays, and I use a lot of that. It's funny, but I use a lot of that for like my training, where you're lifting trays up and you're using it for your shoulders and you're moving really fast. So I think that type of work strength it's different from just being the guy that's always the bodybuilder doing the cleans and everything. I think that's important. I still do that, but having that workman type strength, I think, is really important. So
I knew a guy who used sheep shears. I can't remember.
Oh, really?
I can't remember what he did with them, but he used it and he made his hands so strong that you couldn't break his grip. And it was all sheep shears.
Yeah, that's no, I mean that's it. I think it's awesome. I think, like I said, that manual labor, that type of strength, it's important. So I think that for me has worked.
So you qualified as a freshman. How'd you do your year?
Sophomore year, great year, 43-7. It was awesome. I took second in the region, second in districts, took sixth in the state. Didn't do as well as I wanted. There were some times throughout that year where near the end I beat a certain kid and then I lost to him near the end, and it was kind of figuring that out, like what adjustments did he make? Was I not making the proper adjustments? And so that year, I took a leap, and I was very happy about that. But I mean, there were also tournaments that year that I would always take third, or I'd be in the finals and I couldn't get over that hump. And like talking back to my teammate Eddie, like Eddie was great. Eddie was for some reason he's a finals guy that year. Like if he got in the final, if he either took third or if he got to finals, he was winning it. And there was one tournament we were I think we were up at Riverbend. We were actually up at Riverbend, and it was like they had their Super 32 tournament near the end of the year, and I took third. It was great, and I'm watching Eddie, and I'm sitting there with my dad, and I'm talking to him, and he's looking at me, and and he's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I'm happy. Like I'm ecstatic Eddie's doing well. Like I'm a team guy. If the team didn't do well, you couldn't talk to me. I could win by a pin or tech ball, and if we lost, I was like, don't talk to me. Like get out of my face." But like I'm watching it, and I was like, I just want to be that guy. Like he's like, so what are you gonna do about it? How are you gonna work harder to get there? And so that mindset, like I said, we both pushed each other, and I think we, our mindsets. He was a little bit more athletic guy that was able to do certain things that I couldn't. But I was always the guy that I never stopped wrestling. I never stopped at any moment. So I think that pushed us both to kind of help us start reaching our goals. And we were like, you know what? We stumbled a little bit near the end, but we got to really focus. We got to figure out together what we can do, not just to help each other, but to help the team grow. And that was a big thing. I think overall at Ocean Lakes, the reason why in 3 years, once Coach Arco left and we got Coach Barnhart, who's there now. I mean, in the 3 years we were there, we wrestled over 100 matches and we lost 4. 4 duels. And that's absurd. Nowadays, a lot of teams don't get to wrestle that many duels. But he felt like that was important because a lot of us that wrestled on that team, we grew up, like I wrestled with them when I was in elementary school. And then we went to middle school together. So we were a really, really close-knit group. We were family. And that's what I've tried to, I tried to carry that on, obviously, into my coaching about being family, doing stuff outside of wrestling that will help make you closer. But just that type of environment and doing that, helping us to push each other, because we had competitions in the room. We would always have like, okay, who's going to get taken down today? Who's going to get the most takedowns on coach? Who's going to be able to do that? So that type of stuff that pushed us, that made us better. Those little things that was really important to us. So
I think competitions in the room are really critical to help guys grow and, to just keep people motivated because they love competing. Yeah. And I think the one thing that I liked about with our competitions is it never got personal. And we always knew that. Sometimes I think sometimes you have those kids that they don't like getting taken down at all. And I tell them, I had one this year, and I told him, pull him aside, I'm like, it's okay. Like, you're learning. You're going to get taken down. It's us. It's your reaction afterwards is how will determine how you'll get better. If you react and you're like, oh man, like I gave up a takedown, bump the rest of practice. Then that you're not taking it the right way. And I always looked at that, like the competition. If I got taken down by Eddie, I was like, okay, I'm getting back up to my feet, good, and I'm getting the next takedown. It was like immediately forgot whoever it was. It didn't matter who I was wrestling in that room. If we were doing live or if we were doing sprints, like I wanted to be the first guy back. And it was a macho. It was kind of like a macho thing with our team, but that's how we responded. We responded to sometimes being challenged, and sometimes people say we hear the little chirps about oh, we're starting to become that kind of team where people are starting to notice us. And that happens. Sophomore year, beginning of the year, we wrestled at Cape Henry, and we ended up winning the tournament, but we wrestled 5 teams in the top 10 and knocked them all off. And none of the duels were close. They're like 20-point duels. So, then you start hearing like, oh, for us, we were like, we never believed it. We were like, we're still the same old team that nobody believes in, and we're just going to keep doing our thing. And that's what helped us keep getting better. So that's that. But that figuring out that sophomore year, how we were doing well during regular season, and then we didn't quite finish well. And it wasn't just me and Eddie, but as a team, we didn't quite finish the way we wanted. We're like, okay, what do we need to do? Not just for me and Eddie, but as a team, what can we do that's going to really make us take that jump? And so for us, it was actually, we went to a camp.
We went to a Bucknell summer camp. We did a team camp. It was great. Wrestled a lot of Pennsylvania guys that were really tough on top, and I think that type of physicality, we were just used to wrestling guys, and sometimes even the better guys, it was either like they would push back a little bit or they were just that much better than us. But it was like we've wrestled some of those PA guys that they may not have been as technically good as us, but they were grinders. And if you got underneath, like, you had to figure out a way to get out and really like mentally and tell yourself, like, you're not going to get out immediately. It's going to take some time. You got to keep grinding through it and figuring that out. So that team camp that summer really, I think, shaped us into propelling us that next year into junior year. So
team camps are fantastic. So which one did you say you went to?
We went to it was the Bucknell team camp. We did that one, and then we would always do 2 camps. And the other one that we did, the one before that, we would always do a technique camp where we'd go somewhere and try to learn different things. And then we would go to a team camp where we got to compete. We got a little competition. You would still learn, but you got to also compete and do that. So the one we went to before was a technique camp at UNCG. So that was before the program got stopped and got cut. And I loved it. I mean, you learned a lot from there, and it was great being in North Carolina, and they had a pretty good team actually at that time. So they had a couple NCAA qualifiers. So being able to learn from them and pick up a few things was really great. So, and then taking that and trying to apply it to the team camp when you go to Bucknell, that was a great experience for me.
Camps were a big part of how I grew as well. I think it's very hard to replace that kind of concentrated learning that you can do when you don't have to worry about school, you don't have to worry about anything. You're just, living and breathing wrestling.
Yeah. I think obviously, nowadays in the off season, a lot of people focus on getting matches, and I think getting matches is important. I think getting those reps and trying them out, but I think it's equally as important to just learn.
Yeah.
Just like take a step and just breathe and just learn about the sport. And I think that's something that I think we miss a little bit. I think overall, I think we're creatures of habit. You want to compete. And sometimes you need to be like, take that step back and just like, hey, take a deep breath. Let's slow it down a little bit. Let's learn some more, let's refine our techniques. And I think that helps the most. And also, like, I think the big thing is just because you're not competing doesn't mean you're not getting better. I think that's something that people look at and they're like, oh, like, how many matches did you get in the off season? And you may say, oh, 30. And it's like, well, that's not enough matches. I got in like 100. And it's like, yeah, but I got in 30 matches. And then I went to a camp though, and I learned. And even though I didn't compete in as many matches, what I would do is I would go to clubs, a lot of different clubs, and just wrestle around with guys. So even if I didn't get as many matches in, I'm still wrestling different guys from different, sometimes I would go out of the state and go to PA or go to Maryland and wrestle. So it's like, just because I'm not getting as many matches as you doesn't mean I'm not getting better. I'm just doing it a little bit different way. And I think that's important, that there's multiple ways about how to improve. And every kid's different. And that's something that, as a coach, you got to figure out what works for some kid. Well, some kid might need to take a step back. Some kid might just need to get a lot of matches so they're used to that speed. So it's very different.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was wrestling, because I was a new wrestler, it was important for me to pile on the matches kind of quickly. And so I do think I benefited from going to more tournaments in the off season, going to some team camps. But at the same time, I did still I really needed to do pretty much everything because I wanted to get the technique. And then I ended up going to the J-Rob camp, the intense conditioning, the intense wrestling, and all of it played a real big role. I also think that it depends on the mentality of the kid. Some guys, if they don't learn as much when they go out there and wrestle yet, they don't, they're not kind of ready. Like if they go out and they take a loss, maybe that's a negative thing for them. They don't learn that the way that they could. And then other guys go out there and they're learning tremendously from wins, from losses. For them, they're absorbing stuff that I think is really critical.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think every kid's different. and it's figuring out what works for those kids, what works for this kid, what works for that. I mean, and that's something that I've had to learn. I mean, at a very young age, taking over a program, it's figuring out what works for each kid. Obviously with everything that's going on, it's been really hard because a lot of them, I had a lot of kids that they wanted to wrestle a lot and all. They wanted to go to these camps and do it. And it's like, for not being able to do that, it was hard, so a lot of them, I tell them, a lot of times, like, go online, watch film, watch Matt, go and flow, watch some technique matches. But like, once you watch them, for me, it was like, if I saw it, it was just because I got used to the muscle memory, but it was like, if I saw the match and it would take me maybe a couple practices, but I could pick it up. I could pick it up pretty quickly. Some kids, they need to watch the video, slow it down, and then maybe sometimes watch somebody do it in a match and then try to attempt it. So it's very different, some kids pick up on it quick, some people don't. But that was, for me, I was able to watch it, and I would go back, and I was very good. Like, I loved studying tape, even when I was a kid. Like, I would hate watching my losses, but I knew it was necessary for me to get better. I knew it was absolutely necessary for me to improve and get to the goals I wanted to. So going back and watching tape and looking at it and slowing it down and really watching, like, okay, how's his footwork? What is he doing differently that I'm not doing? How can I correct that so it's fluid? And so that tape, doing that is really important. So
yeah. So the team camp was a big part of your progression from sophomore to junior year. How did the junior year turn out?
Junior year was great. You start off the year. I think I was like 39-0 starting off the year. It's great. It's a great year. I went through a couple tournaments. Started off the year, we wrestled at Salem. Salem had a really good tournament at that time. They had a lot of northern teams. Came down from Westfield. I think Robinson didn't come down that year, but it was Westfield, it was Forest Park. So there were a lot of good teams that came down, and we were on a roll. And I think that year we took a step that, like I said, that sophomore year, but we really progressed. That junior year where we were on it. And I mean, and we had great competition. I mean, Cox was still really good. They still had Cody Stagberg, and everybody's still back. And you also had Kellum, Kellum's always been really good, but you had Ross Binzel, and then Christian Olenowski had just left FC and he was back. So we were already great rivals. And to have that now, that little extra something to really fight for, because we knew whoever was going to win the Beach District was probably going to win the region that year. And Great Bridge was returning to, because Coach Smalls had gone back. So they were really starting to return to power. And it was a great year. We went to Virginia Duels. We had won it, actually, my sophomore year, we had won the Black and Blue division. And the next year we went up to the American division and won it. And we were the first. I mean, it was cool over the intercom, and they're the first team ever in the history to win it back-to-back years. I mean, it was kind of like crazy to think about that. And obviously, in the long history of Virginia Duels, when they've had some great, excellent teams there, and it's like, that's crazy that they've never had a team that's gone up a division and won it back-to-back. And so to kind of be able to do that, like I said, being a trendsetter and laying history down, that was awesome. And so we go through the year. I wrestle, I win. I take second in districts. We win districts as a team. It was great. And then regional tournament, I ended up winning it. And then obviously going into that state tournament, I was high on confidence. Even though junior year was a great year in team, but it also, for me, it was a very personal growth year. And so a great story that I have that I always tell my kids about, getting through hard times, and when you're hit with adversity when you're not expecting it, how do you overcome it? So it was right. I think we were just wrestled FC. It was late in January. And my grandma, who, she's a huge part of my career. She used to drive down. My mom would go pick her up, drive. She'd come down, watch my matches at middle school, high school. And she came down, watched the match, and it was a Monday, and it was middle class or it was between classes, and I give my mom a quick call because I always love talking to her. I'm very close to my family. And she talks to me and she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "I don't know. Something just doesn't feel right." Like, I don't know why, just something's off. And so she goes, I go to practice, and great practice, setting up. We had the Ocean Lakes tournament at the end of the end of the week, so I was super excited about it. We had a lot of great teams coming. It was like 35 teams, so I'm like stoked. Come home, mom tells me, she's like, "Well, grandma's been sick for a while, so she finally passed away today." And so I was just like, emotionally, I was drained. It's like you got all that high, and then it's like boom. And my coach Coach Barham knew how close we were. And he comes up to me the next day because my mom and him had talked, and he was like, "Hey, you're not wrestling this weekend. Just, whenever you need, let me know. If you don't need to come practice, like, take the time you need because, we need you for the end of the season. That's where we need you." Like, so I go through the rest of the week. I'm working out, everything, and then I leave a little bit early on Thursday. And we drive up. And I left Wednesday. I actually left Wednesday. So I drive up, go to her offering. Her nurse gives me this note. I'm talking to her, and I'm reading it. And at the part of it said, "If I was still here, I'd still want you to wrestle in that tournament no matter what happened." And so I go and I look at my brother, and I was like, "Tomorrow night after the funeral, I'm driving home. We're driving back, and I don't care how much I weigh. I'm making weight on Friday, and we're wrestling." And he was like, "Are you sure?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm doing it." And so like I'm Thursday night, it's like 10 p.m. at night, and I called my coach. I'm like, "Hey, come up to school. Like, let's check my weight." And so I was like I think it was like 118. So I was like 5 pounds over. And I spent that whole night, and it was hard. I mean, I ran, I had my sweats on, I'm running, doing everything I can do, and I mean, even before, like, he's driving up to the school and he sees me just running, I'm running around the block where I'm living, and he's like, wow, he was like surprised. But like that type of like personal going through that and being able to push through that, and that really was like a real inspiration, where at the end of the year, I was like, from that point on, it wasn't even about the wrestling. It was like, I'm doing this for grandma. I'm doing it for her. I want her to be up there when I win, where she's smiling down and she's like, "I'm glad you got the job done." And so it became a lot more of a personal journey for me. And it ended the right way. It ended perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better ending to the year, be it, hand raised. I go on YouTube a lot, and they still have that finals up. And they watch it, and afterwards, people ask me why you're so emotional. I'm like, that's why. It's like, that it's not the thrill of winning. It's the joy of having that personal goal and having it be such a personal and family matter, and being able to achieve that and walk off the mat with your head held high and with your hand up, and knowing that she's up top and she's smiling down on you. So it was great. It was fantastic year.
That's a great story.
Yeah. So by that time I'd gone through it, and I'm going through junior year, and through the summer I'm wrestling, doing really well. Started to pick up a little bit of injuries, a little bit. So I didn't get as much of a preseason. I didn't get to compete as many matches as I would have liked, which was different for me, but go through it. So senior year, now we're starting to wrestle. We were in Beast of the East. We're starting to wrestle those big teams. And, Christiansburg, when they're really good, you got Joey Dance at the team, and, Coy Ozai, who was, ranked in the country, out to wrestle. So you're going there and you're challenging yourself, and you have a couple close matches you're winning, and then you kind of go through senior year, and it happened. I mean, I'm not afraid to admit this, but I got a little complacent at the end. I mean, when you're winning that many matches and you're not losing a lot, it's very hard. And some of those you're blowing guys out. It's a little easy to, kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm that guy. And we go to districts, and I'm wrestling Sean Button from Kellam, and I had a call. I didn't wrestle well. And stuff didn't go my way, and I lost in overtime, and it threw me off. Like, from that point, I was just like a mess. And I go to regionals, and then I lose. I take third, but like in the match before, I had to beat this kid in overtime that the year before when we wrestled, I pinned him. It wasn't even close. And I'm still like freaking out, and I'm like, you know what, I can still reach my goal. Like I've gone, so what? I didn't win districts. I didn't really care about districts. That wasn't my goal. I wanted to be returning regional champion, but okay, it's okay. Like I got to progress through it and win states. And returning state champion first round, you lose. You lose in overtime on the last, on the last second takedown. And I'm walking off the mat, and I'm just like, it's unreal how I can't even describe how that feeling was, because you're just like it was like an out of body experience. For like 2 weeks, I didn't really kind of know who I was. I wasn't wrestling like Dalton. And my coach pulls me aside and he says, "Look, you've had whatever you do, I'm gonna love you no matter what. Like you've done so much for this program and everything else, and this team looks up to you as a leader. Finish it the way you want to." And I kind of just, that, I don't know why, but like that talk, like Dalton was back, and I go Ultimate Warrior and go all the way back and take third. And it was pretty surreal, because it was like one of the few times, everybody in the stands stands up and they're announcing, like, this guy who returned state champ lost and found the way all the way to wrestle back and take third and end his career with his hand held high. And I'm getting standing ovation from everybody. I'm just like, that's crazy. I'm a regular old kid that just, worried about wrestling, and everybody's like, great job. And I'm walking off the mat, and I got a lot of people like that. I don't know a lot of people that would have done that. A lot of seniors, especially me, and I had already committed to VMI. I got my future secured. A lot of them, some of them I would have packed it in. I wouldn't have been able to do what you did. And so to have that perseverance to do that was amazing. So, and it helped me a lot, going forward, it made me hungry again, because it was like, you can't get complacent. You can't get like that again, because otherwise you lose track of who you are. So really, really good.
I think that really is a great story. I mean, some things like that make you who you are in a lot of ways. And it's like what you were saying earlier about how it's not whether or not you're going to get taken down. Everybody gets taken down. Everybody gets in a bad position. It's how you respond to that when that happens. Do you keep wrestling? Do you come back in the wrestlebacks? I remember my first business partner, he said to me, it's not whether or not bad things happen. It's how you respond to them. And so, do you hide a mistake? Do you, so this is one of those areas where I think wrestling really has lessons that apply to everywhere else in life, for these.
Oh yeah. I would not be where I am without wrestling at all. There's a lot of big life decisions that you got to make, that it's not easy. And, when stuff goes against you, it's about how you grind your teeth. You can have a bad day. Everybody has a bad day. It's about how you respond to it and how you kind of grit your teeth and get through it. You have times where you have a kid in class that's snapping off at you. And you really, most time you're like, oh, like, just having one of those days. I don't want to deal with anything, but it's like, all right, or like if you made a mistake, there have been times where, even this past year, but before I was a head coach, I was an assistant at North Academy, and there were times where the coach asked me advice on something, it didn't go my way, and I was frustrated, but it's like, you know what, it didn't work out. What can I learn from it? How can I learn from this? So you know what, it doesn't happen again. We're not having those positions. And I think the biggest thing is, like you said, it's admitting when those mistakes happen. It's the acknowledgement of them. I think that's very hard for a lot of people, is to acknowledge when you've made mistakes. But for me, it's part of learning. That's how you become better. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. And you become a better person. So I think, not just a better wrestler, but a person in life. That's what, at the end of the day, I want my kids to win. But if I see them grow up in life and they have a great family and they're doing all the right things, that's going to put a smile on my face. That's going to make me truly happy, is that the little time I had with them, I was able to have impact on their life that carried them through not just wrestling but into life and growing up. So I think that to me, that's what I get the enjoyment out of being a wrestling coach the most.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's incredibly satisfying to help kids reach their potential and to grow into well-adjusted, strong kids, strong adults. So I think it's that really is the right focus.
Yeah, I think when you get too focused on the winning, I think that's when you lose track of yourself. You want to be everybody wants to be a winner. Everybody wants to be a winner. Everybody wants to have their hand raised. But at the end of the day, I talk to my kids now, and even some of my old North Academy kids that I still talk to. I tell them, I'm like, wrestling is a very small portion of your life. So, like, when you're in it, you're in it, and it's like it encompasses your life, and you think like you're gonna wrestle forever, but you're not. You're not always going to be wrestling. And what's important is taking those lessons that you learned from them and applying it to your life, having that discipline to do stuff when you don't want to do them. Not that time managing everything, figuring out little time gaps where you can do stuff. And also, like, even if when you are successful, staying humble and staying in that ground zero where, me staying hungry is what got me to where I am. Why would I change my mindset now? And that's what I'm saying. After senior year, I mean, that's what helped me really in VMI. I mean, there was a year where my junior year, I was having a fantastic year. I was able to beat, coach's poll. At one point, I was top 30 in the country, and I was doing really well. And then I just won. I mean, I was losing third period. I was down, I think it was by 4 or 5 points. And Kate chose bottom, and I turned them twice for 4. It was when the new back points rule came in. I turned for 4. And, I'd won all academies, and I'm like on a high, and I'm like, yeah. And then it's fun, like my mom, I go out to dinner with my parents, and they called me the next morning, Sunday, and I'm already on a treadmill running. And I was like, I got to stay hungry. It's like, you can't, I was like, I got, at one point in the year, like, that's what got me in trouble, was being confident and thinking like, oh yeah, now I could just cut off a little bit. Like, no, you got to stay that same hunger that what got you to there, because that's what's going to help keep propelling you forward. And so I think that's what's really important about that is always staying hungry, never being quite satisfied with where you're at, always trying to find that, always trying to learn. I mean, I'm not competing now, but I still learn a lot. I still watch videos. I still now since quarantine, I can't tell you how many videos I've watched, and none of them are, and probably I can tell you, and I'll tell you probably 5 of them have been probably from 2015 and on up to now. Most of them have been old. It's been like Jordan Burroughs, watching him when he was in college, watching John Smith, just watching how he shot his low single, the intricate parts about it, what made him so effective about it, the drop down, low single, Terry Brands, all those guys. It's cool that the sport is evolved, but it's also cool to go back and watch the originators and see how what they did and how it was so effective. How can I learn to, maybe simplify that to where I can be as effective, not only at doing it, but teaching it. And I think that to me is important.
So do you want your kids to wrestle like you did?
Not really. I think everybody has their own style. That's the one thing I've realized is, you have to be able to adapt to how your kids want to wrestle. I want them to be in great shape. I want them to have the endurance, but they don't have to wrestle anything like me. I want them mainly to have the mentality that I had for majority of my career, where you're hungry and everybody's doubting you and everybody thinks you're going to lose, or you're, like you're getting lucky. Like, that's what I want. I want them to be hungry, even when they're winning. If you're winning, stay humble. There's being confident, overconfident, because what happens is there's good things. Sometimes it's being confident in yourself, but it's also when you get to that point, I tell them there's a point where if you venture into that point of overconfidence, and that's when you get yourself in trouble and you start making mistakes that you don't normally make. And I go back and I look at that, and at that short period where 2 weeks, I lost myself. It was out of body experience. I watched those matches. And it's like, I don't even know who that guy was that was wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, getting back to staying hungry and staying in that mindset where you're always trying to get better. And even when people are patting you on the back and saying, great job, you're doing really well and everything, it's like, you know what? I got to remain humble. I got to remain hungry. I got to keep wrestling, wrestle hard. But no, I want my kids to have the same mentality, but for them to wrestle like me, no. And that's why I think for me, it's just as important to learn about the sport, more about the sport, and be comfortable in different positions. Because there are some kids that have the stronger upper body type that might be better in an over-under position. And I never used it in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important for me as a coach, if I see that can be a strength to them, I have to learn that and learn to be comfortable so I can teach them that. That's why I think it's just as important to learn about, keep learning about the sport, because it's changing. I mean, scrambling wasn't a big thing. And, now if you don't know how to at least have the basics of scrambling as a big guy, you're in trouble. Like, I mean, it's really important. So I think that's why it's important for me to keep learning. So I can not just teach the little guys. I can teach the middleweights and the upper weights. And obviously having the assistant where they're bigger guys so they can help them, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I think it's also important for me to know what that is too, and learn about that and try to get comfortable there so I can help teach them that. So I think that's really important.
Are there any assistant coaches who were with the program before you, or is it all fresh now that you came on?
It's been all fresh, which has been good. I mean, some of the old coaches like Coach Barr, I still can reach out to him and he'll give me advice. But for the most part, it's been a whole new, fresh program. And I do like that. I like the fact that they were willing to give me a chance to build my own staff as young as I am, because that imparts a lot. For me, that gave me the confidence, like, okay, I can make these decisions and not have to worry about them always being like, well, the old people did it this way, so that's the way, you should try to. It's like, there are some things from the old that I do want to emulate, but I do also want this program to be in my vision. I want it to be kind of in my mold of that type. So I think that's really, really important about, them giving me that confidence, the school and the principal and the athletic director giving me that confidence to do that. So, but I mean, it's still growing. I'm still trying to, I talked to some of my old friends about, trying to, have them come in and try to help out when they can. Because I know they're very, very busy, but, being able to do that, I think was awesome. So.
Yeah, I think having people in the wrestling room coming in to help contribute to the program, that's a huge part of a successful program. I was just speaking with one of the great bridge wrestlers from back in the heyday when they were, annihilating everybody. And, the way he describes it, that room was packed with alums, with college wrestlers, with extra coaches walking around. It's just completely packed with, practice partners, instructors, everybody you could imagine.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. That's why I think it's just, I think it's important having not just all those people in there, but also for the wrestlers and for me as a coach to go to other clubs and learn. I think that helps a lot as well. And so, yeah, but having as many partners, because the thing is if you have more partners in there, who wrestle these different styles, you can get accustomed to how to wrestle a little bit differently and figure out, and that's what helps you become more well-rounded. I mean, the benefit that I had in my room was Eddie was a little bit more the short athletic type, but then I had other partners that were long and gangly. So that helped me tremendously, having those different types of wrestlers and body types that I was always prepared for everything. And I just had those guys. I had guys around my weight that they were just it was weird. They were all built differently. So I never really got caught off guard if I wrestled a short, stocky wrestler, or if I wrestled one that's a little bit more athletic, or I wrestled one that's a little longer and lankier. Like, I was always accustomed to wrestling because that's just what I did. And that helped a lot. but it also helped, going to other clubs, going to Kellum or going to PA or going to Cox and wrestling with them, because it was like, okay, well, they're wrestling at a different level and they all wrestle a little bit differently. What can I pick up from there mentality wise or technique wise to help me? So, because I think part of it is obviously it's that fine line, because you want to kind of keep, some coaches like that, you want to keep those little secrets that you're good at to yourself. But at the same time, you do also want your kids, you want to go out and learn, because it's going to help you grow. It's going to help you learn and grow and all that. I mean, the biggest part, like a big thing for me in college, was one of my assistants, he did his master's at Ohio State. So he took me and 3 other wrestlers up to Ohio State for 2 weeks, and we got to train with them. It was completely different. And it was like the hardest probably 2 weeks I've ever wrestled in my life, ever. Because I was really looking forward to wrestling Nathan Tomasello, because I had almost wrestled him my senior year when we went to DC, and I just missed out on, just because I had lost the first round before I wrestled him. But he wrestled at the U.S. I mean, this was off of him winning a national championship. And then he went to the U.S. Open and got hurt, so he didn't get to wrestle. And so I had my partners for those 2 weeks was Reese Humphrey and Logan Stieber. So I learned a lot. And it was like, that first week was like a experience unlike anything I've ever had. I mean, we're wrestling freestyle. So I'm getting ducked and dumped to my back and low singled and leg laced. And I'm like, and I think it was like at the end of that first week where I'd done with practice. And actually it was really cool, because I got to meet, that was when Dom Demas, his brother Josh, had just graduated, or I think he was about to graduate. And so Dom was coming in the room because he was just starting to finish up his high school career, and now he's at Oklahoma. So I think it's really cool to see that. And I'm talking to Logan, and I was just like, obviously I know like the weight, and you've wrestled a whole lot of other guys, and he's like, you gotta get accustomed to picking up on the little details again. He's like, I can tell like you're very good, but it's like sometimes you're good at making adjustments, but you make the adjustment sometimes a little too late. And by that time, I know the adjustment's coming. So when I know it's coming, it's easier for me to adapt. And so then we wrestle again. And that second week, Reese wasn't around as much, so I'm wrestling with Logan, and we had a couple of Paris Graham guys that came up. But it went from Logan was it was always getting takedowns to where I'm able to defend some and able to get my reattacks and score a couple times, even though he beat me. But it was like that adjustment period, being able to kind of take that little advice that I got and pick it up, really helped. And so, that's what it's important about, wrestling and being in that room. And I mean, you're meeting Bo Jordan, who you see, all 4-time All-American, Kyle Snyder, Olympic world champion. So meeting those guys, Coach Ryan, and you're meeting all these guys, and you're talking to them, and you're just, for 2 weeks, you feel what it's like to be in like that type of room with that type of atmosphere, with that type of partners. And it's trying to, obviously, you're trying to replicate that, and it's a little bit harder, but that's why I think sometimes it's also important to open your room up to some of the other people, because they can help make your wrestlers better. So that was a really, really unique experience that I carry with me, to this day. That's helped me. So
it's amazing the experiences we have with wrestling that stick with us forever. Irreplaceable.
Yeah, I mean, I was actually, this was one of the other stories is, I just got in the job, and my coach found out, and I was about to, and it was 2 days or 1 or 2 days before I was leaving from Virginia Beach to drive up, move into my apartment permanently. And so he invites me out to dinner. So I'm like, okay, cool. I thought he was going to make congratulatory dinner. And like 8 of my old teammates from high school were there, and they all surprised me, and we all had dinner. And it was like one of the great, I was just like, I got to start crying, because I was just like, this is like not, like, you guys are all living your lives, and then you guys had the time to come back and for us to meet up and have dinner and talk about that and catch up on old times, but to congratulate me on getting, starting a new career and everything like that was amazing. So, like you said, those moments from high school, how close we were to be able to come back and, you're able to do that. I mean, my friend one of my friends, he had gotten married earlier in the summer, and he didn't even know, and I surprised him at his wedding, and he was like ecstatic, and it was cool. And a lot of us, we got caught up as well from high school. So, those memories that you have, I tell them, like, you got, like, everybody remember. For me, it's not as much about the destination. It's about the journey and knowing when you're in it to really enjoy it while you're in it, because it's not going to last forever. You're going to have those memories to look back on, but it has a special place in my heart. And going through all that, it's never the matches where I won the most and everything that I remember. It's going through those sprints with my teammates and picking us up. And when I'm struggling, one day and wait, and they're like, "Hey, we got you. We're gonna help you get this off. We're in this with you." That's where it's all about. I think that camaraderie and that family type atmosphere that you get from wrestling that you don't always get from other sports. I think that's what makes it very unique. Not just the lessons, but just how close you can be with your, with your brothers and everything. So I think that it meant a lot to me to have that.
I think that's right on. You can't control the destination completely. There's no way to know, that someone's going to win a particular match or a particular tournament, but you can control your attitude during practice. You can control your attitude with your teammates. Like that journey, it's what it's all about. The destination, of course, is what we've got in our sights, and it keeps us going. But it's really that journey that makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I tell my kids, man. I'm like, I tell them a lot, it's really mostly about that journey. Like, yeah, you want to win. You want to be obviously the guy that's staying at the top of the podium, but I tell them, like, wrestling, like, it's a lot of what you got to do what you can to control. You got to control what you can control, period, point blank.
That's right.
You got to do that. You got to do the right things. But I was like, sometimes it takes a little bit of luck. Sometimes it takes that guy that is a bad matchup, and he just happens to lose a bad match, and then now it might become a loser. Now you face a guy that wrestles a little bit similar to how you're accustomed to wrestling, and it makes it a little bit easier. I think it's a total thing of everything. I mean, it's not just one thing that comes into it. It takes you doing the right thing, but it takes a little bit of luck as well. It's never just always the straightforward, the guy that wins all the time. The guy that's the best technician is never, sometimes the best guy doesn't win it. Sometimes it's the guy that, for me, the senior year, I mean, I had people tell me, like, even though I didn't win it, I was the guy that took third, and everybody said I was probably the best guy in the weight class. Sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes, things don't go your way, but, it's about doing what you can control and putting yourself in that right position and just wrestling your match and staying in your moment. So, but that journey is super important.
One of the big themes that I hear a lot is control the controllables.
Yeah.
Just, you simply can't, I think you and I as coaches, we probably take it for granted more because we've learned this again and again. Mm-hmm. I think the kids need to hear it. They need to, some more than others, but I think it's important probably for all of them for us to hammer that in is that you got to control the controllables.
Yeah. And I think the hardest thing is, I mean, even for us then, I think the biggest thing is it's always it's doing the right things even when nobody's looking. Yeah. That too. I think that, control what you control, but always do the little things and keep doing them even when nobody's watching you. That's what I tell my kids. I'm like, there were plenty of times where I don't want to go for a run. I didn't want to do the little extra stuff that I knew was going to either improve my conditioning or make me making weight a little bit easier. But I did it, and it pays off. And I was like, that's what's important is you got to realize that it's those little things that it's not just going to practice and doing that. It's living, making it a lifestyle, making it a point to eat healthy all the time, get in the right nutrients, get the right amount of rest, not stay up and, want to watch that football game or something that's on late at night and like you got a match. You either got a match the next day, you got a match in a couple of days. It's about going to bed, getting that right amount of sleep. If you need to get up a little bit early in the morning, get that little extra run in. Stuff like that, even, I mean, for me, I read a lot. I read a lot of philosophy and stuff like that. A big person in my life, a big philosophy for me like that I always think of is Bruce Lee. I always think like to be like water and flow and not just always think. Sometimes I think a lot of times you don't, we think way too much. Or some of my kids always tell them like, you guys are thinking. You guys think way too much. You want to make it instinctual and just flow with everything and be fine. And that's why like a lot of times, we'll do live, but I've also a lot of times I'll just do sparring with them where the intensity is not very high. And I tell them like, it's not about who's getting taken down and who's scoring. This is about to be purely about learning and being in positions where you're not comfortable and trying to learn how to do it and learn how to get through them. And I think that's important. It's not always the, like say, grit and grind, staying inside that box. Sometimes you got to think a little bit outside the box. The guys that are the best guys probably are not always the guys that think the most conventional. They're not the guys that are, high crotch double and finishes. They're the guys that are like, oh, I might do a high crotch and double, but what if and come up? But what if he starts trying to roll through or tries to bump my hips? How can I finish that? And I think sometimes we don't practice those positions enough. We practice, okay, if he whizzers you, step behind his leg, pull it up. But there's sometimes where you're wrestling a kid that's got a rubber knee, and if you don't practice that with them or if they've never been in the position, they're never going to experience. So I try sometimes at least once a week when we were in season to practice those type of stuff that you're not accustomed to. And even when like now, like in high school, even though they don't, the edge of the line and wrestling on the edge is very ambiguous. I always tell my kids, I'm like, treat it like a college match until they tell you to stop wrestling, wrestle. Like keep wrestling, do it, because I was like, if you stop wrestling, like one thing that, and this is just, I think common sense for everybody, nothing good happens when you stop wrestling during match. And usually stuff never goes well. So just wrestle until they tell you, you know what, you got stop, you blow the whistle, you hear them, they touch you, tell you stop. I think that's really important. So.
Well, I think this has been an awesome conversation, Coach Henderson. I really appreciate having you here today.
No, I appreciate it. I thank you a lot. I mean, obviously, when you emailed me, I was really surprised. But I was smiling through both ears. And it's been great. I've learned a lot. I've gotten to talk about obviously my career and everything like that, and just keep projecting. And I just hope that whoever watches this, that they're able to take those experiences and just really enjoy the journey that wrestling gives you, and take those lessons and really apply it to life. And like I said, the biggest thing for me is seeing the lessons and stuff that I teach or they learn from me, and seeing them apply it, and it goes on and they have great lives, and it has a positive influence and makes me smile. That's gonna make me happy. So I really appreciate you having me on here. I hope we can talk again sometime, either on your podcast or just offline. But I really appreciate it, and thank you again.
Absolutely, I hope so too, and I'm sure our paths are going to cross, and a lot of people are going to benefit from this, from the knowledge you're imparting. You've got a great journey, and you've really shared an awful lot. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Thanks for listening to Back Points today. If you want to support the show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you find the show. Also, it helps us if you give the show a rating on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. Feel free to also make a donation via Patreon at patreon.com/backpoints. Thanks, and see you next episode.